Hello, Patreon pals, fellow travelers. It's Dr. Stu, just back from my 50th high school reunion. Um, Very reflective, very fun. Great to see some people. About 12 to 13% of our graduating class have passed away. So I began to reflect a lot on what's going on in the world. You tend to do that when you're surrounded with everyone in the room is exactly the same age as you are, and you're all talking about what you were doing 50 years ago. And then, I'm in airports and I'm watching Olympics, and every commercial is for a big pharmaceutical company and some drug you can't pronounce. And then you had the opening ceremonies of the Olympics and all the controversy. And then it's a political season, so everybody's hating on everybody else. And then you have fears of a new pandemic with bird flu and the American Medical Association creating codes for bird flu shots that haven't been distributed yet. So they're setting us up for encouraging people to get the shot, and that's going to come out. And then will there be a financial crisis or an October surprise? And just seems the world is kind of tense right now. Um, I know it's not just me. I know probably you all feel that way unless you're living in a box someplace. Um, but some of you sent me some stuff over the past week, and I wanted to put it in the trash bin, but my OCD wouldn't have let me. And it was videos from some of the people on the internet that tend to be nails on a blackboard for me most of the time. People like Babies After 35 and Paging Dr. Fran, and a new one named Dr. Jessica Nurick, Knurick. Brianne sent me one, Lunar Midwifery sent me one, and somebody I want to get to know named Maggie Dog eCoin Millionaire sent me one. And I want to go over them real quick. But before I do, Nathan Riley just sent me recently something about, not something, he sent me something to read from Substack by somebody named The Druid Stares Back. And I took one paragraph out of that, and I want to share it with you because it seems applicable to me, to what's going on in the world in general, and especially in where we feel like you're going crazy because everything you think is right, you're being told is wrong or is not okay. And you're doing it wrong. Uh, and then they call you an ism or an ist of some kind. You're a hater, you're a vaccine denier, you're whatever. So it goes like this. I have wondered what it is that makes academics so prone to ideology and so intolerant of those holding opinions opposite of theirs. Certainly, one contributing factor must be the conditioning centers of higher education, and especially graduate programs, particularly in the humanities, but I would definitely tell you that's going on in medical schools. People in these programs are conditioned, to at least act the part of the dutiful progressive, at least until they receive tenure or until they graduate. Even then, they might be in danger of retribution if they step out of line. For instance, you may have difference of opinions, but if you're in a company that tells you you have to do certain things, or you have to think a certain way, or everyone needs to be vaccinated. Today, I did a consult with somebody from another state who wants to go to grad school, and they want her to have the varicella and MMR vaccines in order for her to go to grad school. She's 39 years old. So we were talking about exemptions. But the point being is that they want you to continue to think that way. And even when something in your gut is telling you it's wrong, even then they might be in danger of retribution if they step out of line. It didn't used to be that way, and I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule. But this is pretty much what I saw over my 20 years in higher education. This is from The Druid Stares Back. And the reason I think that's relevant is because we can all have differences of opinions, but we could tone it down a little bit. We don't have to hate on the other person simply because we disagree with them. But what you see in most influencers on Instagram is a divine hatred of somebody who thinks differently than they do. And they actually use this, they accuse that person of exactly what they themselves are doing. So for instance, I'm going to go through a couple. The first one, I think, can't remember who sent this one to me, but whether it was Brianne or Lunar Midwifery, but it was from a Dr. Jessica Nurick, and I'm not asking you to click on her because I don't necessarily want to give these people clicks, but it was a snarky breakdown. It said stitch incoming of Jeff Barkey. He's a pediatrician, and he has a company that sells healthy stuff, supposedly.
Before you give your baby vitamin K immediately following birth, you better watch this video.
Oh good, prescription for liberty coming in with the fear-mongering tone to unnecessarily scare a vulnerable population. Here we go.
Informed consent, right from the package insert.
To be clear, informed consent is an ethical principle where a patient must have accurate, sufficient, and complete information and understanding before making a medical decision. If it's a half-truth or information that misleads someone, that's not informed consent. But as a medical doctor, I'm sure you know that.
All right. So she accuses him of fear-mongering about vitamin K. And what he suggests is that vitamin K may be there's not something that we should be giving to every baby, which is sort of how I feel, sort of how Christiane Northrup feels, if you guys listen to that podcast. And we explain why. And that nature designed it in such a way that babies are vitamin K deficient.
I believe God did not create babies short of vitamin K.
There it is.
There's a reason why their vitamin K may be low.
Babies are born with low vitamin K for three main reasons. Number one, the placenta is impermeable to vitamin K, meaning that vitamin K doesn't get through the placenta to the fetus. Number two, newborns don't have a large proportion of vitamin K producing bacteria in their gut microbiome, and so that takes a little while to develop. Number three, there's very little vitamin K in breast milk, even if the mother supplements, so babies aren't getting vitamin K from their diet like we do.
All of that's true, but that doesn't answer the question, why did nature design it that way? If nature wanted to design something for the baby to need, it could have gotten across. But she doesn't enter that because they think in one mindset. They think in one medical mindset. And rather than just making her point about how she thinks vitamin K is important, she has to tear somebody else down.
Those are the reasons. And unfortunately, those low levels of vitamin K make a newborn baby susceptible to vitamin K deficiency bleeding, which can and does occur in babies who do not receive vitamin K at birth. But you must know that as a medical doctor. I bet you know all this. So it's got to be intentional disinformation then to fearmonger and ultimately sell your courses and supplements. Seems like you understand this landscape of social media and how fear-based marketing is so successful, and you're exploiting people and capitalizing on their fears and anxieties as new parents who just want to do what's best for their babies. Gross.
Okay, so what she does initially is she says that Dr. Barkey talks about the black box warning.
FDA has required a black box, a very unique and special warning placed on the package insert. Here's what it says. Severe reactions, including fatalities, have occurred during and immediately after intravenous and intramuscular administration of vitamin K.
Why are you stopping there? Why aren't you explaining that the black box warning is there because the same exact product is used at high doses rapidly to stop bleeding in older patients? And when it's used like that, those people can have severe life-threatening allergic reactions. Why aren't you telling them that that's not what happens with the small amount that's used in the vitamin K shot for newborn babies? And why aren't you mentioning that there's been 0 recorded cases of death after 6 decades of use in millions, if not billions, of babies all around the world? Seems like that information is relevant to informed consent, no?
And there is some question about that because that's for higher doses and it's for adults. And apparently there haven't been any babies that have had problems with it. But still, if it's not supposed to be given IM to anybody, why can't we give it sub-Q? If you're going to give it, why do you have to attack the person who's saying that? Because that's what he or she believes. And she says you're not giving full informed consent when you do that. You're skewing your consent. And then my feeling is, well, you know what, Jessica, this is a reel. It's a reel. How are you going to give full informed consent on a reel? As if any doctor can give full informed consent. And then she goes on to talk about certain things, and she, of course, doesn't give full informed consent. She gives her opinion, but she doesn't talk about the things that Christiane Northrup talked about or that I've talked about before, is maybe that baby's blood isn't supposed to be thicker. Maybe baby's blood is supposed to not clot. Maybe stem cells are supposed to be able to travel easier through it. None of that's in her informed consent about giving vitamin K. She doesn't also give the numbers of babies with vitamin K deficiency bleeding. And that has always been a big thing for me, because if whatever numbers you can look at literature and you can find all kinds of different numbers, but the numbers that I look back years ago when I wrote my informed consent sheet to give to my clients was about 6 per 100,000 babies. And of course, now it's impossible to do that study anymore because there aren't any babies not getting vitamin K enough to do it. But let's just say it was 6 per 100,000 or 10 per 100,000, doesn't matter. So why don't we try to figure out what's wrong with those 6 babies as opposed to giving it to 99,996 other babies who don't necessarily need it? And why did those 6 babies have bleeding and the other 99+% don't? That would be something that makes perfect sense. But that's not discussed because you can't discuss everything in a 2-minute reel or 1-minute reel. This is, and you don't have to get, and she gets very snarky with him. She said, well, a real doctor would know that. A real doctor would know informed consent, but I'm sure you know that. And then, that sort of snarkiness, it's not necessary and it turns people off. And if she has a point to make, she's losing her audience, at least, or maybe not. Maybe she's just appealing to her little audience. Then she talks about the fact that that Dr. Barkey says there's aluminum in there.
This product also contains aluminum.
Aluminum is not an ingredient in the vitamin K shot, but because it's the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, it can sometimes appear in products that use containers that contain aluminum. But if it is present, it's in a very small amount and it's monitored and highly regulated for safety, far more regulated than the supplements that you sell on your website. One vitamin K shot is only allowed to contain 0.33% or 1/3% of the total allowable daily amount of aluminum set for safety, an incredibly small amount if it exists at all. Seems like that information would be relevant to informed consent, no?
And there is in vitamin K. But she says it's monitored and highly regulated. Now, I know that I'm biased. Most of my listeners agree with me that who's highly regulating it? Who are we trusting to regulate this stuff? So I don't really know what she means when it says it's highly regulated, because I don't know there's any safe level of injecting aluminum into a 7-pound baby. Okay. I just don't know that there is. And then she goes on to, instead of just saying that, she says, and it's probably better tested than what's in your supplements, Dr. Barkey. She doesn't say his name, but she has to, again, degrade or insult him in some way. Then Dr. Barkey mentions maybe the reason is because God designed it that way. And then she goes, there it is. As if a mention of God, and my impression is that a mention of God is something that's not tolerable for her. Now, maybe she meant it differently, but that's the way it comes across. And as again, if she's an academic and she believes what she believes, then anybody who believes something on faith, as if people in academia don't believe stuff on faith all the time. That's another reel for another day. Then I don't know why that upset her so much, because that is the way nature designed it. And maybe it's wrong, but nature doesn't usually do things that are wrong. Then she says he's giving intentional disinformation, and it's fear-based marketing. And I don't think he's giving disinformation. He's giving information. Disinformation, misinformation, that stuff. Those are words made up by people who don't like what the other person is saying. So if you don't agree with something, that's the definition of misinformation when you're in the driver's seat, when you're in power. So I think that this is what Dr. Barkey believes. I know it is because I know of him and I've been in panels with him, and I also feel the same way. And many of you probably do too. So my point is, why not just make your argument? Right? Why not just make your argument? It would be very simple. Just say, here's why I think vitamin K is necessary, instead of trying to bash someone else. And then you lose focus, you lose your point, because people look at you like I did. And I had no idea who this person was. And I didn't go into this with a preconceived notion. Somebody just sent it to me and said, what do I think? And my impression is, this is what I think. Now you know what I think about that one. Okay. So then there's one where babies after 35, that's the lady with the hat. Well, I'm always wondering, why can't she take her hat off? She's wearing scrubs and a hat whenever she talks. And this one is a little bit of, it's not a little bit, it's a lot of fear and, God, just sort of venomous approach to people who support women who choose to go past 41, 42 weeks waiting for labor, because this is about stillborns. It's a very short reel. And she says stillborns at 42 weeks should never happen.
So I am covering L&D today. And I'm about ready to say something that's my personal opinion based on years and years of obstetrical care and being a high-risk pregnancy specialist. There is absolutely no reason why we should be having patients that have IUFDs or stillborns at 42 weeks of pregnancy.
And what she means by that is that nobody should get to 42 weeks, is what she means, right? She doesn't mean that stillbirths should never happen, because stillbirths happen, anytime during pregnancy they can happen. But she then goes on to say to anybody that suggests that women should just listen to their bodies and trust nature and all that stuff, that you should stop all the bullshit you're spewing.
So for all of you accounts out there who don't take care of pregnant individuals because you don't have the clinical expertise to do so, but yet you'll post on social media that due dates are just a number and babies come when they're ready and not all that other bullshit y'all spew.
Is what she says. And you should have to go to the room at 42 weeks and tell them that their baby is dead, and then go over burial options with them and take pictures of the family. By the way, this is what midwives do.
I would love for you to walk in the room of a patient at 42 weeks, completely uncomplicated, and have to tell them that their baby is gone. And then I want you to find some way to get through the conversation to tell them what's going to happen next. Tell them about the process that's going to be needed, what their options are for autopsy and testing, what their burial options are. I want you to be involved in taking the pictures of these babies and putting together the memory boxes, taking the footprints. I would like for you to do it all. And I want you to be there for every single tear that is shed.
When we find that, if it happens at 39 weeks or 40 weeks, we don't leave that to somebody else to do it. The midwifery model is that you are there for them through the entire process. It's funny when a doctor says that you'd have to go in and sit with the patient and tell them these things, because yeah, that's what we would do anyway. But what her point is that this should never happen, because you should never let people go to 42 weeks. And if it does happen, it's on you for doing that. And you should be there to shed for every single tear that the mother sheds. This is the words. This is, that's verbatim from what she says. There's no reason for that. She could express her opinion about waiting for 42 weeks and having stillbirths that late and saying, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's a bad idea to wait that long, because the rate of stillbirth goes up. She could tell you how much the rate of stillbirth goes up, because she's all for informed consent about elective induction at 39 weeks. But if a woman chooses to wait till 42 weeks, it must be because she was given skewed information or coerced by her practitioner, generally a midwife. Why don't you just be nice? Just try being nice. The world is too full of shit right now. So let's stop it. Let's just be nice. Right? Again, I've offered to debate these people. I would rather do it live. Her or her friend, paging Dr. Fran, who she teamed up with in the third video that someone sent me, which, by the way, was a very reasonable video between the two of them. They teamed up to talk about elective induction at 39 weeks, and she said they gave many reasons why that would be a choice that a woman might make. And they said that, and they were all valid reasons. It's like a childcare situation, somebody's traveling, you want to just plan it, you just choose to do it, that's what you want. Those are all reasonable things.
Because you need to schedule childcare.
Because you have anxiety about going over your due date.
Because you prefer to have a more planned birth.
Because you simply want one.
Whatever your reason is for wanting an elective induction of labor at 39 weeks, it's a valid one. As OBGYNs, we want you to go into your induction empowered and informed about your decision.
And then they created an elective induction at term fact sheet, which I think is a very reasonable thing to do. And I was going to leave it at that. And then I thought, uh-oh, you know what? I better read the fact sheet because I'm a nerd. So I did. And it's 5 pages long. And the first 3.5 to 4 pages are all based on studies that support the ARRIVE trial. Their whole argument is based on the ARRIVE trial. And this is, again, gets back to the Druid stares back comment about, I've often wondered what it is that makes academics so prone to ideology and so intolerant of those opinions, holding opinions opposite of theirs. Because the ARRIVE trial, there's lots of evidence out there that has debunked the ARRIVE trial. And I don't mean, when I say debunked, I don't want to, that's a bad word because that word has been misused now too, that have shown flaws in the ARRIVE trial. One of the biggest flaws in the ARRIVE trial is the fact that it's not applicable to how most hospitals and doctors practice in the United States or other parts of the world. Because the key thing they found, which their primary outcome was to lower neonatal death, and they didn't. Their secondary outcome was to lower the C-section rate, and they did by 3%, from 22-something to 19-something. But where in the country do we have anywhere that's having a C-section rate of 22%, let alone 19%? We don't. Most hospitals have a C-section rates of 30 and 40%, some even higher. So it's not applicable to the way doctors practice. They don't say that. So they're cherry picking their data for their fact sheet because they're in favor of induction of labor. Now that's fine if they're open about their bias and if they're honest about it. And if they didn't ridicule those of us who think that the ARRIVE trial is crap and that nature's design has benefits. Because the ARRIVE trial has 2 endpoints mainly, and that's the neonatal death and lowering the C-section rate. And the other studies they quote, and they quoted 5 other studies, I think, they said that there are consistent benefits of decreased cesarean section rate, which I've said is not applicable to most models, and decreased neonatal morbidity. I didn't really look into that deeply, but I will say this. What morbidities were they looking at? Were they looking at long-term morbidities? No, they were not. So you can't find what you don't seek. And if they're not looking at bonding, breastfeeding, chronic disease in these children, autoimmune disorders, other things that may occur, the effect of artificial Pitocin or Cytotec instead of mom's hormonal cocktail contributing to labor. But none of these are studied. They can't. They don't know how, and they have no interest in it because that's not how the medical model thinks. They think in groupthink. So the other thing too, in all these studies is again, the same flaw that was in the ARRIVE trial, which is the practice patterns. There's no control over the practice patterns. They're not. And then there's a thing called the Hawthorne effect, which I've talked about before, which is that people behave differently when they know they're being watched. So if you're part of a study, you're going to, the purpose of the study is to try to prove that induction is good, which most doctors believe. You may do things that you wouldn't normally do to get a baby out vaginally, like let it go longer, that sort of thing. So, and then the labor management is so variable. Could she eat? Could she walk? Could she move? Could she do these things? Could she have to have an epidural? Did she have to deliver lithotomy? Did she have to labor in lithotomy? All these things, none of these things are controlled for in these studies. And if I'm wrong, then I apologize. But I've looked at the material and method section of many of these, and that's not something that's really mentioned because it's not something they care about. Then in their fact sheet, they go on to quote ACOG. And they say, it's reasonable to offer elective induction of labor at 39 weeks if the patient prefers it, and there are, and the facility has availability for it. So that's reasonable. And that is absolutely true. But ACOG also doesn't talk anything about the downsides of elective induction of labor. Because I know that, again, some of you are listening to me for the first time, but I say this all the time. All that matters to the medical model is the live baby in the bassinet. And how the baby gets there and what happens to that baby down the road is not the concern of the medicalized birth model. It might be the concern of an individual physician, just like Babies After 35 says, you have to shed tears with your clients. You have to do all these things with your client, but the medical model doesn't think like that. The medical model works on a shift. It's not about continuity of care. I'm going, right. So anyway, the last person, they did say some other, but I want to say that I give them credit for this one. Had a very normal tone. They were just talking about, they didn't bash anybody who disagreed with them. So I want to give them credit where credit is due. And they also, in the last part of it, they gave questions to ask for women to ask their doctor about elective induction of 39 weeks. And I just want to give some of these questions because they're actually pretty good questions. So how does scheduling of work at the hospital? Do I have any control over the schedule? Who will be managing my induction? Will it be you? Will it be your group? Will it be the hospitalist? Who's going to manage it? What methods are used to determine my cervix and what cervical ripening agents are used? How do you decide which one's best for me? What's the average length of time for an elective induction of labor? How long will you let me go? Will you let me go? You know how I feel about that. I know how you guys all cringed when I just said that. Can I take a break in my induction? Can I eat in my induction? Can I drink in my induction? Can I get an epidural at any time in my induction? If it's not working, can I go home? At what point do you consider breaking my water? So there are some really good stuff in this handout. Problem with these people from my perspective, and when by these people, I mean these influencers who tend to rag on people who choose a different path. And I'm trying not to do that. And I don't think that I generally do that. I mock people sometimes. I don't usually mock them by name, but I have my dumb doctor dogma segment, that sort of thing. But the problem is that most of the time they're being hostile to somebody in their videos and their reels. They're putting people down. Generally, women who choose a different path, midwives who choose a different path, and doctors like me who choose a different path from them. Right? Generally, it goes to show when people are uncomfortable and have to use pejoratives and name calling, it's because they're uncomfortable. It's because what we do makes them uncomfortable, and it's a form of dealing with cognitive dissonance. And I'm just trying really hard right now because the world is a mess and people are angry all the time. Now, that may be my interpretation simply because I happen to be on social media and my feed is filled with these stories and you guys send me a lot of this stuff. But I just want to say, let's tone it down. Let's talk to each other. Next time paging Dr. Fran or Babies After 35, you guys have an issue that you don't agree with whoever's on, rather than bashing them, why don't you reach out to them? Or Dr. Jessica Nurek. Did you reach out to Dr. Barkey? Maybe you guys could make a reel together. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it have been nice if Trump or Biden had taken Fauci and Deborah Birx and put them on a stage with Peter McCullough and Jay Bhattacharya early in the pandemic and said, let's have a 2-hour debate on national television, live. But they didn't do it. They never do it. People in power rarely will offer that option. I would love that option because I think in most places we will have agreement more than we have disagreement. And I say to these doctors, if they're all OBs or even if they're any kind of medical doctor, I honor you because to go through medical school, to make it through residency, you have to be special. I mean, you get beat up really bad. And we may disagree on 99% of stuff, but it doesn't mean you didn't go through trial by fire. And for that, I give you respect. So I hope that we can move on in the future and try to give more respect to each other, even when we disagree. Okay, so I feel great now. This was just hanging over my head. All this stuff you guys are sending me. You know what? I can't beg you not to send me these reels, but I wish you wouldn't send me these reels. So until next time, Patreon members, thank you. Thank you for trusting us. Let's have a great year. Okay, bye-bye.